Welcome everybody to the Microsoft 365 Platform Community Call. It is October 12th, 2021, and my name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm one of the community leads in the Microsoft 365 Platform side. Now, today in our call, we have some updated news on the Microsoft 365 Platform. Not actually a significant amount of new things, again, happening within the past week. Now that we're doing weekly calls, there isn't actually always a significant amount of news to cover. Then we'll cover the monthly contributors within the Microsoft 365 community efforts. So these are people who've been actively contributing and helping either in the as a demo format, blog post format, sample, or GitHub contribution perspective. So we'll cover all of that through. Then we'll have a picture time with the Together mode. And then we have two demos. Bob German is going to talk about hands-on with the Microsoft Graph file uploads and downloads. Let me do an ad hoc demo. The Microsoft Teams Toolkit and something super cool what we have there in the 2.7 version. And then if we have time, let's go to Q&A. Now, we do have a lot of assets available for supporting Microsoft 365 development in general. And so getting started on the Microsoft 365 platform, we do have two different YouTube channels. So we have the official, let's say the more polished Microsoft 365 developer YouTube video channel. And then we have the Microsoft 365 community videos where, for example, all of the community call recordings and demos will be stored. Now, a lot of good stuff in both of them and tens of thousands of followers in both of the channels. Now, we do have a lot of open source assets available for you to take advantage as well. So please don't start from scratch. Go and have a look on what's available. Now, since accessing samples and information from the GitHub is a bit of a difficult thing, we've wanted to make it more easier for you to find what's available as a sample. So we do have multiple individual sample galleries available for you. And there's another slide coming up relatively soon. We are closing into the actual publishing of our unified Microsoft 365 sample gallery, which will help you to find what's available. So you can easily go to one location, search, for example, for Microsoft Teams bot samples, and you will find them, and you can easily filter down those samples which are interesting for you. Now, if you're wondering that there's too many URLs to remember, I can't remember any of these, and there's luckily only one URL to remember in the real world, which is AKMS M365 PnP. That's much better than Google or Bing, right? Because everybody should have that as their starting URL in the browser. Now, a reminder also on our Microsoft 365 developer program, you might think that, why are you always showing this every single week? Well, because people still don't know about it. So all the time, every single week, we're having discussions with partners, and they're kind of quite often telling us that it's really hard to do testing in a Microsoft 365, and why do you need to pay for additional tenants? And the reality is you don't have to. You can only register, you can just simply register to the Microsoft 365 developer program, and you will get a free E5 developer tenant with 25 accounts and all of the awesome capabilities which are available with sample content, which you can use for pre-sales purposes or testing out your solution. So really, really awesome setup for everybody to take advantage. So strongly encourage you to take advantage of that option. Now, I kind of briefly touched already the unified Microsoft 365 sample gallery. It is still officially in preview. We're still doing small adjustments here and there to make it really, really polished. We're getting closer and closer to get this one officially out and with a big announcements. But basic idea here is that you can go to one URL and you can more efficiently find all of the different samples which we have available in GitHub across multiple GitHub organizations. So you can come to this location, you can target, for example, Microsoft Viva. Pretty soon you can do a search against the samples which are available, and voila. Then from there you can access the actual GitHub location. So just making it easier for people to access information. We also in here, we wanted to actually focus on the perspective of the contributor. So every single contributor has their GitHub profile exposed through this portal, and then you can actually view the samples from a contributor perspective. So for example, in this case, we can see all of the awesome contributors, which Nandeep has actually contributed across the community within the past year. So thank you, Nandeep, for being an example here. Have a look on that, give us feedback. We really, really want to understand how we can improve that also in the future. Now, related on community and contributions, let me throw the discussion to David.
Thanks, Vesa. Well, friends, as you may know, we are an open source community, and with that, we invite you to utilize all of the resources as well as contribute back to those resources. But we understand there are hurdles in place that may prevent you from doing that. Things like, how do I navigate GitHub? I'd like to start presenting, but I'm a little nervous. I've never done that before. Sharing is Caring initiative is here to provide hands-on guidance in a safe space, inclusive way for you to get more collaborative opportunity with the community. That means in our sessions, we do not record them. It's a safe opportunity for you to ask any and all questions. We're going to show you how to navigate GitHub, and it counts as a contribution. So we invite you to join any and all of our sessions, aka.ms/sharing is caring, as well as our ever popular AMAs. We've got a PnP PowerShell coming up October 26th, PnP.js coming soon, Starter Kit coming soon. And congratulations to the CLI team for their new release. We just secured a date in early November for an AMA with that team. So be on the lookout for that to get scheduled here today. But again, we invite you to any and all sessions and would love to collaborate with you. Vesa, back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, David, on that one. Really, really awesome stuff within these discussions for sure. Then we want to remind you on two different podcasts or video blog. Well, the other one has a video blog option as well, options which are available for you. So both of these are releasing typically one new episode within a week. So we do have the Microsoft 365 Developer Podcast with Jeremy Thake and Paul Schefferlein. Really awesome setup of updates on what's happening in the developer platform. And then we have the second podcast, which is the PnP Weekly podcast, which also have visitors, and we talk about the different updates, what's happening from a news perspective in the Microsoft 365 platform. Both options are available as a podcast format, and the PnP Weekly is also in the video format in the YouTube channel. By the way, in here, if you're looking into interested on having a specific person as a visitor or have other suggestions what we should be covering within this podcast, either one of them, please do let us know. Everything what we do is for you to benefit out of that as well. So your feedback is super, super important for us. Now, we wanted to also remind you that the Microsoft Ignite is coming. So the registration is open for Microsoft Ignite. If you go to the https ignite.microsoft.com, you can register. It is a completely free conference, and it's happening in November 2nd to 4th this year. So it's the conference to go to know the latest in the platform area and also in the non-developer side of the house as well. So a lot of cool announcements are queuing up for the Ignite, which is happening. Well, that's happening actually less than a month from now. It's pretty cool. From a news perspective, this week was relatively, let's say, slow as we're here closing into the Ignite. I think all of the big announcements are queuing up there. But there was two news in the Microsoft 365 platform side. So one was the new ways of cloud storage partners to integrate their services with Microsoft Teams and Office. And this is really about the fact that if you are a cloud storage partner, you can actually integrate your file experiences or your file storage almost seamlessly in the Microsoft Teams and in the Office platform. So really, from an end user perspective, it looks like it would be the storage in the Microsoft 365 side. But if you are a partner storage provider, it is actually stored somewhere else. So really cool setup for partners as well. And the second thing is a relatively small change on the Microsoft Graph eDiscovery API related on settings tag, which is going to be a bit of adjusted. And that API surface is in the beta side. So as it's in the beta, you can expect small adjustments here and there on those APIs. Now, once a month, we also want to recap all of our contributors who have been actively involved within the Microsoft 365 community channel. So the October 2021 update is not yet available, but it's coming soon to be available. It is still pending for me to finalize a few things on that blog post. It is the massively long blog post, which is listing all of the different new things which are happening within the past month or so, including all of the companies and all of the contributors who've been actively involved within our community channels. And covering those people from an individual perspective, we are now splitting again the people in 3 different slides because we're running out of space and the font size is getting smaller and smaller. So these are the people who've been actively sharing their knowledge between others in the community. So contributing in the GitHub, contributing as a blog post, contributing as a potentially community called demo. And we do have multiple different options available for you to contribute. And the mental mindset here is really that as we are sharing the knowledge and we're multiplying the knowledge as well. That was a good way of putting it by Appy from the Police Digital pretty recently. So that was that's the thinking, because I'm sharing my knowledge, you're sharing your knowledge, we're multiplying the knowledge together. So these are the people from A to G, and a lot of additional people from H to B. So thank you for being actively involved in the community, and thank you for helping others to understand how we can extend or customize the platform as well. And the last slide from R to Y, a lot of people, a lot of familiar names, but also a lot of actually new people in this as well. So it's great to see the new people coming in, and also it's great to see the same people who've in the past contributed being active in the community as well. So thank you from Microsoft side of that. Now, we also typically call out the companies which those people actually belong to. Well, those companies which we have a permission to call out. So we do need your explicit permission to have your company logo shown on the slide, but we want to promote these companies because they do give their employees the option to contribute in the open source for the benefit of others in the community. So thank you, these companies, also being part of this journey and building this great community together with us. And of course, there's a lot of people who've been really active on the Microsoft side in the community channels as well. So thank you, Microsoft people as well. And these people are consultants, customer engineers, PMs, and engineers, and so on. So different roles who've been doing this as well. Now, I'm talking quite fast, so we're actually on schedule. This is really good. Now, let's do a quick picture for those who are interested in coming here. And let me actually start the recording and move and set the things into together mode. So 1 second. I will flip everything in together mode. Any preference on the together mode scene option today? Anybody 1, 2, 3. I'm going to randomly select something here, and then I'm going to move it in here. And we have 50 seats on the call, and I guess we already filled it up. That was fast. So let's 1 second. I'm not recording it. I'm not recording. 1 second. I need to go to the recording. You will see as me starting 3, 2, 1, and the recording starts. Excellent. Thanks everybody for being here. And hopefully by end of this year, we'll see each other in the physically in the conferences as well. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for being part of the community. Thanks, everybody. Cheers. Good. So let's do that. And let's move that in here. And you should be seeing my slides. And it seems to be working okay. So let's actually go to the demo section. Bob is the first one then today to jump to the demos. So let's start, Bob, with you, related on Microsoft Graph file uploads and downloads, or hands-on at that.
Sounds great. Thanks very much. So let's see here. Let me share my screen. And so, yeah, this is not actually new functionality, but I think it's something that a lot of people maybe don't fully understand how the potential of using in any application you might be building using Microsoft 365 for your file access. And if you're not familiar, there's this thing called Microsoft Learn, and it's a place where there are tons of hands-on labs on all aspects of Microsoft development, including Microsoft 365 development. So my teammates and I put together 3 learning paths, which are sequences of labs, really. And we did that earlier this year. And so I'm going to highlight one from the Graph Scenarios learning path, which is about file uploads and downloads. So it's really, Graph Scenarios is actually growing. So we've got 3 more in the pipeline beyond what we already have. So right now, here it is. And I'll put those URLs back up at the end. Right now, we have 3 in here. One is showing users emails. Another is calendar access. And another is download and upload files, and that's the one I'm going to get into today. And as I say, we've got 3 more of these in the pipeline, and we, if you have a particular area that you find interesting, I would love to hear from you. Just drop in the comments or grab me on Twitter or what have you. The 3 that are coming, I will foreshadow, are Excel, which is a really cool one, and I'd hope that would be published for today, but hopefully really soon. It's very, very close. There's one on user presence. And there's also one on trending. So kind of tapping into all the signals that come out of the Microsoft Graph to find recent documents and other things that are relevant to a particular user. So we're trying to kind of cover not only how to call the graph, but also kind of a little bit of extra tips and tricks in each one of these. So this one that I'm going to go over today is really going to start off by connecting up a starting application, which is extremely basic, and then show you how to display some user files, how to download those files, and then how to upload those files, all using the Microsoft Graph and the Graph SDK. So if you think about it, you know, if you were building an application and building file access into it in some way, it would be an awful lot of work to build that from scratch. And then if you add in compliance and versioning and offline access and all the things that are part of OneDrive and SharePoint, it becomes a huge amount of effort to do that. And so why not take advantage of Microsoft 365? And oh, by the way, your customer is already paying for it. So you can't beat that really as a developer, I think. So that's really what this is all about. So I'm going to start with let me actually flip over. I've got this thing set up to different, with a different GitHub branch for each one of the labs. I'll start off with the basic package that's here. And it's designed to kind of be available and understandable by everyone. So the idea here is, you know, if you see us doing direct DOM manipulation, please don't judge us. We're trying to be open to everyone. How big can the file be? It can be as big as M365 can handle, the way that I'm going to show you. Well, it may take a while, so I'll get into that, because there's a really cool feature in the Graph SDK that makes that possible, or makes it much, much easier than it would be. Anyway, here's the HTML. You can see that it's got some divs that are going to hold the content, and all I really have here right now is a sign in, which will show up initially, and once I've signed in, it's just going to welcome me by name. There is also a UI.js, which is extremely minimal here, and here's the direct DOM manipulation. But again, we didn't want to restrict this to just React developers or Angular developers, so this is what everybody, at least if you've done any kind of browser development, you probably will understand it. That was the objective here, is to focus really on the graph part and not on, you know, our favorite UI library or what have you. And then the real action is here in graph.js. So let me just show you what this does and get into that just a little bit. So make the text a little bit bigger, not that big, because then it won't fit. So the first thing that we're going to do here is create an auth provider, which handles authentication. And there's this auth.js, which I'm not going to get into, but it basically calls a library called MSAL, the Microsoft Access Authentication Library. No access, forget that. Microsoft Authentication Library. And we're going to just create a little provider here, which just has a single function in it called get access token. Then on line 9, we're going to new up a graph client using the Microsoft Graph SDK and pass it that auth provider. So that means that the SDK, whenever it calls the Microsoft Graph, is going to take care of the auth. And if it needs to authenticate, it will. If it doesn't, it's going to be smart and not require that. And by the way, if I didn't define all my terms here, the Microsoft Graph is a REST API, so it means it works over ordinary HTTPS connections, and it is the main API for all of Microsoft 365. So the SDK is, you don't really need it, but it's going to make it easier, especially on the file upload scenario. So my initial code is just going to have this get user. And every one of these, the way we structured this is I want people to kind of think about the permission that they need. Everything you want to do in the Microsoft Graph, just like you would in the user interface, you have to have permission. You can't just go doing stuff. And the app has to have permission as well as the user. So here, ensure scope is a function that just makes sure that that auth provider that we just set up has user.read access, which is one of the permissions. And then we're going to call the simplest graph call in the world, which is /me, which gets my user profile. Okay, so let's run it. So I'll type npm start. And what this will do, npm is just being used to host a little website. There is no bundling. We're trying to be simple, simple, simple here. So here's the website come up, and I'll sign in. And since I've already signed in, it's just going to welcome me by name, and that's it. And that's not very exciting. So let's go ahead and add some stuff to it, right? So I will flip over here, and I'm going to switch to the file upload and download branch. And so in the course of doing the lab, you're going to add all of this code and get to kind of play around with all this code. So the very first thing that I want to point out is this function, which gets a list of files, because you can't download a file unless you can see what files there are, right? And so this time we're going to ask for files.read. And Jim has a question. What does ensure scope do if we don't have user.read? Yeah, it's dynamic scoping, Andrew. And what it would do if you don't have user.read is it will pop up and ask for the permission. And that's a permission that the end user normally has the rights to grant. And so it will just say, hey, is it okay if this application has files.read? That's independent of whether the user does. And as you'll see, we're going after the user's own OneDrive here. So they should have read permission to their own OneDrive. But this is kind of, you can think of it as kind of like your phone, where, you go to use your phone and all of a sudden an app wants to access your photos. And what's with that, right? Well, you obviously have access, you as a person have access to your own photos, right? But what this is doing is it's adding an extra level of safety where the app can't just go, any old app can't go looking at your photos. So in this case, any old app can't go reading files. And so that's what we're doing is we're saying, is it okay for this app to read files in this case? And if the user has granted permission, or if the admin has granted permission, then this will just return and not do anything. If it needs permission, it's going to pop up and ask you. And then we're going to call this method called /me/drive/root/children. And we're going to select specific attributes of those files that we want. And then we're going to do a get. Now, again, this could all be one HTTP. We could just use fetch and get this stuff directly, but the SDK makes it a little bit easier for us. And so let me just pop into the documentation here, because this is really, I end up living in here quite a bit, actually. Oops, wrong link. This is the Graph API reference. And I have to say the Graph folks have done a really great job of this. And if I go into files and I go down to drive items, list children, so they're being very generic here. And, the files really are in SharePoint and OneDrive, and which are really the same backend. Even if the files appear to be in Microsoft Teams, they're still in SharePoint or OneDrive, and that's another whole topic. But this API is being generic and not kind of hard coding any prior knowledge of a product like SharePoint or OneDrive. Every one of these API calls has a permissions block right here where you can see what permissions are required. And you should always go with the least privilege that you need to do the job. That's why I asked for files.read. So clearly, if I had sites.readwrite.all, I could do everything to every SharePoint site. That would work too, but that would be more than I need, right? And then I'll point out, now here's the one I'm using, me/drive/items/root, which is a sort of magical item ID. Children, and getting back the list of children. But I want to point out that there's other things I could do here. I could get to a specific drive ID, which might be somebody else's OneDrive. If I have permission as a user and the app has files.read permission, I could do that. Or maybe it's a Microsoft 365 group, which automatically has a SharePoint site in it, and I could access the things in that site, the files in that site. Or I could access a site based on its site ID. Or I could access a particular user's OneDrive based on their user ID. So lots of paths to get to the same place, right? And then what I'm going to get back is a list of all the children inside of there, which is basically all the files. So let's go ahead and run it. To do that, I'll just go back to my app, and I have to sign in again. And there they are. There's the files, right? So very simple. So just again, to review this code, that's it. That's the whole thing. And then the rendering code is just going to loop through these, what it gets back, and show those on the screen. Okay, so let's go and download one of the files. Now, if I clicked on this, depending on how it was written, I might actually view the file, but I'm actually going to download it. and it's going to come down as a download. And if I open it, you can see that it's a picture of the Microsoft Graph mascot, the giraffe, which I happen to have on my OneDrive at all times, just in case. And so there's that. So let's take a look at how that works. So I scroll down a little bit more, download file. It's just another path here on the API, me/drives/items, and the file ID that I got back the first time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get back the download URL. So somebody asked about large files, and this is kind of the first step is, how do you handle large files on download? You probably don't want to do a GET request and then get this giant payload back from the GET request that all of a sudden in your JavaScript or your other code you have to handle. So what the graph does is it gives you a short-lived URL that only lasts for, I don't know, maybe Brian knows or somebody knows on the call how long it lasts, but it's very, very short period of time. And then immediately we're going to use that to download the file. And the way to do that in a web browser is to use window.open. So I could say window.location.href is the download URL, and it would send my browser over to that file. But by doing window.open with _self as the target, it's going to download the file, which is what a user would expect in this kind of an application. Then the third thing, of course, is to upload a file. So let's see that work. And this is the one that amazed me really with the SDK. So we'll get into that. I'm just going to come in here and pick a file. And I have all sorts of little animals here. So let me see if I can find the one I wanted. And we'll go ahead and upload that. And it's just going to kind of upload in the background. And then when it's done, it should, and we're going to test my upload. We were talking about bandwidth here earlier. There we go. Because I'm sharing screen and camera and uploading files at the same time, and I don't have the best upload speed. So there it is, and I can download that again, and hopefully that will work. Come on. And we should see the picture get downloaded. I think I did that. It said undefined bytes. Well, this is a live demo. Let's try that again. Oh, it downloaded a bunch of times. I don't know what's going on. And hey, SharePoint people, I bet you never expected to see camel in this demo. All right. Anyway, couldn't resist. Okay, so let's take a look at how that code works. And this one is a little bit more involved. So for this, I need files.read-write experience. Thank you, Todd. Lots of groans. And there's two ways to do this in the API. So let me flip back over to the API for a second. If I come here and I can do an upload of a file, and this one is limited, I think, to 4K or something. It's a fairly small file. It's kind of easy though. You just do a put request with the file contents in your HTTP request, and that's great, except for it only goes up to a certain limited size. What you really want is this thing called a resumable upload, which will handle large files. And if it gets interrupted, it will actually pick up where it left off if you go back, which is just brilliant. It's a little bit more complicated though, because you have to create something called an upload session, and then you start uploading bytes into that session until you're done, and then you tell it you're done. So you don't need the SDK to do that. You can do all this with a ton of different HTTP requests. And, you know, it's just a lot of work. Or you can use the Graph SDK, which reduces this to a single line of code. So, well, sort of. I'm going to set up here. I'm going to set my options, and I'm going to tell it that I want to upload in blocks of this size. And I'm going to create my upload task. And the SDK is just going to take care of it for me, and then I just await the upload, and after a while, it's done. That's it. Really, really simple. There's no, you don't need to manage the session yourself. Let the Graph SDK do it for you, right? And that's basically the way it works. So let's see if there was anything else I was going to talk about. I guess I'm just going to kind of go back to the call to action on this one and invite you all to try learn modules. Everything is there click by click. You don't even really have to know JavaScript to do it, but if you do, you'll get more out of it. The first one, as I said, is Graph Fundamentals, then the Graph Toolkit, which is a great control library that you can use, and that's often featured on the community calls. And this one is about graph scenarios. I'd love your ideas for more graph scenarios, so please post them in the comments. And that's about it. I'm open to questions or moving on to the next demo. Answer a couple of questions.
That's okay. Absolutely.
Is the Graph SDK available in Spfx? Yes, it's built in. It's right there. All you have to do is ask for it from the SharePoint context. I just wanted to throw that in because I think it's awesome and I use it all the time. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Oh, related on that one, actually, just for those who might be wondering, unfortunately, the Graph SDK in the Sharepoint framework is a bit of an older one. So we're working together with Microsoft Graph Engineering to get a side-by-side support for the JavaScript SDKs, which will then enable us to upgrade to the latest version of Microsoft Graph JavaScript SDK. The problem right now is that if we would upgrade to a version 3, which is the latest, so that would mean that the version 1 Microsoft Graph JavaScript SDKs would not work on the same page, and that would not be good for any of the existing solutions. So we're kind of between a rock and a hard place. So we're now working with Graph Engineering to get that one unblocked, so we're able to move to a newer version of that as well.
Okay, good.
So cool stuff. Anyway, so let me demo on something what we've been working together with Microsoft Teams Toolkit people to make the life of all of the developers easier with SharePoint Framework. So let me actually do this. Let's see how this goes. What I wanted to actually show, Microsoft Teams Toolkit V2 is still in preview, just to be clear, but you can already test it out and provide us feedback on how we can improve this. But in the 2.5, 2.7 version, we have a native support for debugging SharePoint Framework solution directly in the Microsoft Teams workbench. And this is insanely cool because it's going to help so much as we build those solutions to be available. So let me actually do this. Maybe I should actually slow down my energy and speed of talking. Now, let me create a Microsoft Teams application. And let me a bit of zoom this so you can more easily find and see what I'm doing. I'm not going to do code as such. I'm more showing how things are working in the Teams Toolkit. So I'm going to create a new solution. It's going to be a tab solution. I'm running the 2.7 version of the Teams Toolkit. And the question number 3 is basically, are you looking into hosting or are looking into building a Teams solution which is hosted in Azure, or do you want to take out advantage of automatic hosting and still implement your stuff using TypeScript and all of the web stack development tooling? And that's what we want to do here, so we don't have that complexity of designing cloud-hosted solution. Again, the matter of opinion, and in many cases, if you have already an existing solution, then you're bringing that to the Microsoft Teams. You don't necessarily build SharePoint Framework solution. Now, let me create a solution which is a normal Java, plain TypeScript, not using React, and let's call this TypeScript. I can't write. It's pretty typical. TypeScript and debug demo as the solution. Let's call that debug demo. And I will select the folder and I will go 2-step up and I will create a folder TypeScript demo. Hopefully there's nothing confidential visible in the left navigation. It's good to call that out always so that you're really paying attention on it. So let's give the application name a name. At least I'm not showing hopefully any passwords as I'm doing that. We've had that in the Ignite a few years back. So let's call this a debug demo. And Pat Miller still hears about that mistake, by the way, every single time he's presenting. Now, I'm going to trust authors. This is my solution. It created me the solution with an example structure for SharePoint Framework. The structure is a bit different as we're using the Teams Toolkit because we have the app package. Let me actually extend that. As we're using the Teams Toolkit, the app package is actually stored in a separate folder above or as a sibling to Spfx. So it's a bit different approach as if you are using Yeoman Generator. We are looking into alignment here across the Teams Toolkit and the Spfx Yeoman Generator so that it's familiar for everybody how these things actually work. Now, if you are familiar with SharePoint Framework, you are familiar that how the structure will look like. We have a web part. In this case, we created the web part. It's TypeScript, standard web stack development. I can do debugging, all of that stuff. As I'm opening this up, you pretty much, or maybe you noticed, it was insanely fast to get this one up and running. And that's because we didn't run npm install yet. And that's also the reason why we're still getting missing declarations and all of that stuff in here. So we're kind of one way of making things faster, but then as we're doing development, it doesn't really make us faster. And again, we're looking into adjusting some of this stuff as well based on feedback. But let me actually do something really, really cool, and this should actually work. It's going to take a while because we're going to run npm install, and then I'm going to talk something as we're doing that. But I'm going to put a breakpoint in that solution, in that inner HTML, where we're actually rendering the output. Let's call this "Welcome to Microsoft Teams." This is unfortunately using still the older template version. We're going to do modifications on that significantly as well. And then save is a good thing to remember. There we go. So that's saved. And then I'm going to go back in the Teams Toolkit side. Oh, sorry. I'm going to go back in the run and debug. And then I'm going to see what are the options which I have available for debugging. And this is really, really interesting. So we do have a new option here available, starting from version 2.7 of the Teams Toolkit, which isn't yet documented even for outside of the Teams Toolkit. Technically, this works without the Teams Toolkit as well. So you can do debugging of the Spfx solution directly in the Microsoft Teams workbench. Microsoft Teams workbench, if that makes sense. So let me, for the sake of mixing some of the profiles, I'm going to take a Chrome as the debugging target. I'm going to do F5 or click play. And what's going to happen here is that the Teams Toolkit is going to take every single thing what is needed automatically for me, which is actually really, really cool. Now, this is going to take a while. So let's see if there's any questions and in the topics. But technically what we're doing here is that we're running now the npm install. That's going to, again, take a few minutes because there's quite a lot of dependencies on the Spfx solution structure. But it's going to install all of those types, all of those things in the type screen. And then it's going to actually install the solution to the Teams tenant. And then it's going to start my Chrome browser. And then we should be hitting that line 19 in a debugging mode if everything goes as planned. Now I'm actually pretty sure that this will not work. Oh, well, let's see. Now that I'm making so much excitement that most likely the demo will fail. That typically happens. No, just kidding. But technically what we're doing here, the team, I'm going to repeat, the Teams Toolkit version 2 is still in preview. This is the version 2.7, which I'm running here. And it has this new capability. We're working on actually getting documentations of this Teams Toolkit, also when you are using just the Yeoman generator. So if you're doing development of Microsoft Teams development directly with Spfx from the Yeoman generator, which is 100% supported as well, and this is an option. So you're able to basically use the Teams Toolkit. What is it? Teams Development Dashboard. That's the right term. Yes, I guess so. So let's see. Now it's starting. All of the automation is doing its magic. It's doing all of the debug strings, all of that stuff. Pretty soon it's going to fire. Well, now it's going to do the Webpack. And that didn't take too long. It actually did fire the Chrome in my previous, in another window. So I'm going to move it back in here. Why did I use Chrome? Just so that I'm actually using a different profile rather than my default profile in Edge Chrome. And I'm going to sign in here. I'm going to use my password to sign in. Here we go. And I don't care. Yes, stay signed in. We can see that on behind of the scenes, the debuggers and everything else are doing their magic. It's going to now move the Microsoft Teams. It's going to now ask me to get that solution directly installed in the tenant. So I didn't do anything else than just created the solution and click at F5. So it's doing all of this automatically for me. I'm going to click this add a solution in the Microsoft Teams, and 1, 2, 3, 4, we should be hitting the breakpoint after. It's going to remind me that, hey, we are debugging from localhost. So let's actually run debugging strings. And behind of the scenes, we can already see a yellow line. And we have a breakpoint available in the Microsoft Teams, in the Teams Toolkit. And this means then that right now I can do something like this: context, SDKs, Microsoft Teams, context. That's pretty awkward that it comes twice. And then I can do something like host client type, and it's going to tell me where all of the properties. So basically, I'm able to do debugging directly inside of the Visual Studio Code without me really doing any additional tricks or anything like that. And that's actually pretty cool. Oh, thank you. Aush Havara. I'm probably pronouncing your name wrong, but thank you for the feedback. So this is actually really cool. And it's going to help a lot on doing the SharePoint Framework implementation towards Microsoft Teams, either in the Microsoft Teams Toolkit. So again, in the Teams Toolkit, we 2.7. Is it 2.7? I guess it is. Let me double check that as well. Which version I'm actually running? There it is. So it's 2.7. That's natively included. So it's just an F5 to be clicked. And we are also looking into documenting this for the Yeoman generator. And this is the first time I'm showing this to anybody live. So because we needed to actually have some additional content on the session as well. So hopefully that's kind of interesting. Please do give us feedback related on Teams Toolkit and how we can improve things. If you test it out, if something isn't really feeling good or something isn't working, please to let us know. Right now, we know that in the Teams Toolkit, we do have a bit of a interesting setup where we are kind of bypassing the SharePoint Framework Yeoman generator. We're looking into alignment there as well. So you could use the Teams Toolkit v2 in the future for creating SharePoint Framework web parts, Microsoft Teams personal application, Microsoft Teams meeting application, Microsoft Teams configurable tabs, or Viva Connection ACEs. So we're looking into having all of the different scenarios available directly in a single tool. And that would certainly help rather than having multiple competing tools and things to install available, just one. And then it's a matter of, do you want to have your application hosted in Azure or in a Microsoft 365? And that's then defining the experience. Cool. Now I have to ask if somebody was following up on the chat. Did I miss any good questions and things? And which I didn't answer. So there's a good question from our Rush here. SharePoint Toolkit will be also there in the future. What we're looking into doing is basically having a one toolkit. So we're working with the Teams Toolkit v2 people rather than introducing a SharePoint toolkit and a Microsoft Teams toolkit and a Viva Connection toolkit and whatever comes to mind toolkit and something what we're going to release maybe in a year toolkit. And let's have one. And then it's a matter of where do you expose your components? What are you actually building? It's going to provide all of the different options. The Teams Toolkit traditionally, obviously, was targeting Teams only. Viva Connection is a really good example of a experience which is Microsoft Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive all together. So we're trying to get away from this isolated, you need to select the service or select the tool rather to what are you implementing? This is the tool, what you can do. There's a question, how can we use this workbench for developing bots on Teams, not just tabs? Could you please document this as well? So there is a really good documentation actually available already on the Teams Toolkit on the creating of the bots as well. Now, word of reminder, Teams Toolkit v2. So there's documentation already available on this. It is still in preview, so it's not yet GA'd. So it's basically intended to be used not in production. So we're hoping that people would actually use this tooling, provide us feedback, and then we can release that available. There are multiple ways of doing then, multiple things what you can do with the Teams Toolkit, including creating bots and other experiences as well. So there is a support for bot and Teams and tabs already available, and it's really easy for sure to get started on it. Cool. I'm going to drop my demo and let's actually go back in the slides just to recap on things and then go to a Q&A in the end. Now, do we have any active questions which we did miss for me or Bob or somebody else? We have Brian Jacket, we have Patrick Rogers, a lot of smart people from Microsoft in the call helping on anything on the Microsoft 365 platform. So Nikolai is asking Graph API related question. Planner, what is the difference between tasks read-write and task read-write shared permissions? The description is almost identical. Now I'm watching Brian you on the screen. You can't see me watching you, but I'm watching you.
Yeah, typically when it's the shared, those are things that you don't own, but someone has shared with you. So in the case of like calendars, if someone has like shared their calendar with you, you'd be able to read those items off of their calendar that they've shared. I'm not familiar with the task piece on this. I'll need to look into this, but I assume this is ones that have been shared with you that you don't own yourself explicitly.
Excellent. Thanks, Brian, on that one. And then Andres is asking, how does the debugging in Teams work if you have a custom apps installation turned off in the org level? How could I add it as an exception if I debugging on fly? Now, that's a fair question. So if you're using the Teams toolkit, you can't really use it in production and shouldn't be using development tooling in production as such. So the intention is to use the development, for example, developer tenants for validating the functionality. Debugging in production is always kind of a scary, and rather doing instrumentation and understanding what actually goes wrong in the production is the right way of doing that than debugging it over there. So it really isn't designed for Teams debugging in production as such. Any other questions and urgent questions? Mahmoud is asking, or Hamish is asking, are you coming to the European Collab Summit in Düsseldorf? Yes, I am. So I will be there. Is it in late November? I won't be, unfortunately, in Las Vegas because of the flight challenges right now between Europe and USA. Well, it might absolutely get lifted, but we'll see what happens. How can we duplicate the SharePoint 0365 search result set using the PnP search web parts? People love the PnP features, but often want the same results as the out-of-the-box search. The results, so underlying APIs, what the PnP search web parts versus the SharePoint online search are hitting should be the same. So they're hitting actually the Microsoft Graph search APIs, and there's no magical other APIs which the Microsoft Search is using. Now, in the PnP Search web parts, there's actually two options. You can use either the SharePoint Search, SharePoint Search APIs or the Microsoft Graph APIs. And if you can see differences between the outputs or outcomes or the results, that's most likely related on that. There might be also some UX level, let's say, filtering or priority settings, which could influence on that. But by default, they are hitting exactly the same API. And as they're hitting exactly the same API, they're getting exactly the same set of information back from the API. So they should be identical. If they're not, then we certainly need to investigate that. And then the Mikael Svensson, who's a good colleague from Norway related to Microsoft Search, would be the right person to have that question on, but he's helping actively on the PnP Search web parts. So I would actually go to the GitHub and ask that question there if there's explicitly something wrong on those. As Microsoft rolls out newer SharePoint versions, whether Spfx solution can go around from 5 years of time or other solution can take place of it. So Rashi's question is around the Spfx and the new versions, and that's I'm not sure if it's related on cloud or if it's related on premises. But in on-premises, unfortunately, the latest version of SharePoint on-premises version, which is the SharePoint Server Subscription Edition, which is was announced in actually a year ago in Ignite. It went to public preview in July. It's going to be released in GA relatively soon. It's still using the same SharePoint Framework UX layer version. In the out-of-the-box web parts and out-of-the-box experiences. And that's basically then, unfortunately, locking the third party, so partners, also on that same version. So as the native SharePoint experiences were built and were never updated to use a newer version of SharePoint Framework, we can't, well, partners cannot use a newer version there as well. Now, for SharePoint Online, will there be a new version of SharePoint Framework or some other, let's say, auto-hosted scenario model for Microsoft 365? Answer is absolutely. There's going to be a significant amount of new versions of SharePoint Framework. Will we rename SharePoint Framework at some point? That might happen, and there will be new options available. So that's native, kind of a natural thing in the cloud. So we're evolving the cloud gradually based on the feedback, and there will be new versions available. Bob is agreeing with me. That's already really, really good. Thank you, Bob. So I don't want to disagree with you on anything.
Exactly.
But that's pretty much it. We have 5 minutes left. Let's take that 5 minutes to, unless there's a, well, Marcin. Yeah, so Marcin actually did show in one of the community calls how can you do debugging of the Microsoft Teams SharePoint Framework solutions in the Microsoft Teams, and I guess you are actually doing exactly that. In that, yes, you are. You're using the new Teams hosted app Spfx. And then adding a frame. Thank you, Marcin, for sharing that. That's actually a pretty cool way of doing that with the Yeoman generator hosted SPFX solutions. I think we have to do this in a bit of an easier way for sure and get it documented. But thank you, Marcin. I was expecting you to have some sort of a hack on this, so really, really cool. I've not seen, well, I've seen Vikings in Netflix. I'm actually in the middle of the last season. So on that one, that's pretty cool. There are a few Finn actors on that one as well. So Finnish actors. On Norseman, I need to double check that one. Anyway, so thank you everybody for joining. Let me recap a few of the slides. Let's not actually start talking about cool shows in Netflix. Microsoft 365 developer community has multiple calls available. We're looking into more and more consolidating on this Tuesday call to make it consistent and for everybody what's happening where. For now, we have this Tuesday call, and then on top of this, we have a specific monthly calls on adaptive cards, Microsoft Identity Platform, Office Settings, and Power Apps. Power Apps calls, as an example, is for a week from now, and Charles already has posted the agenda in the Power Apps blog platform, so you can go and check it out what's going to happen within a week. We also have the Thursday community call, kind of a demo-led calls, so the Microsoft 365 community and SharePoint Framework calls happening on Thursdays at 7 a.m. Pacific time. If you're wondering, again, too many URLs, I can't remember any of these URLs. It's really, really hard. Only one URL to remember, again, is M365 PnP. The recording of this call will be available in the YouTube channel within 24 hours, typically around 18 hours. And please follow us on Twitter. That's the easiest way to know what is the agenda, either in Twitter or in Facebook or in LinkedIn. And we're publishing the agenda always a few days before the calls. The next platform call is on October 19th. But thank you everybody for joining. A really great demo, Bob. Awesome work on that one. Thank you for the lovely discussion in the chat as well. Please keep the feedback coming. Thanks everybody. Let's stay in touch.